Oh, yeah. Right? That's oil pressure. Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. Allow me to introduce you to the new flip car on the channel. Alright, so in this video you're going to see the engine in this X3 get completely rebuilt. It gets pulled. It's a long time lapse showing the rebuild of this engine, including new crankshaft, new connecting rod, new head gasket, the whole bottom end, everything it took to make this thing run again. Alright, I'll send you over to my time lapse of me pulling the engine, rebuilding it, and putting it back in. Hopefully you guys find it entertaining. The oil doesn't look good. Yeah, you can see it. So I kind of was ready for this. I expected it. But at the same time, it would be nice if it didn't have this. When the timing chain failed in the first place, it may have blocked the pickup and then they just slapped it back together hoping for the best. But it's just starting to go. All right, well, we'll catch up in a bit. So as determined, it's going to need the engine to come out so we can do the bearings. Being an extra, we had to pop the axles out. That's the axle bolt. The differential is going to have to come out. So I'm going to set you guys up on a time lapse while we pull this engine. So here's the engine on the stand. So the plan is to leave as much on there as possible. We're gonna bolt to the block and not the bed plate in terms of the engine stand. Only gonna need to remove stuff that's bolted to the lower section of the block to be able to get that bed plate out, like the motor mounts, water pump. So we'll get you set back up on a time lapse as we turn this thing upside down and start tearing into it. Bearing stayed on there. Ugh. Not good. It's like just want to jump itself right out of there.
It didn't spin.
No. That's why it was the only way it could have been quiet. Okay. Okay. Here we are back from the time lapse, giving you guys an update. That's the crankshaft that came out of the car. It's not usable. I had a good used crankshaft in good condition that I put in. Put OEM rod bearings, put OEM crank main bearings, and verified the color coding and everything. Spins perfectly. Was about to check for clearances, and that involved moving the big end of the rod back and forth. They should move ever so slightly. You can measure that with a feeler gauge. This is what a normal rod would look like. This is a little discolored. This is bad because it got really hot, so was this, but we were gonna measure it to see if they had maintained their shape, and they did not, because this one in particular is solid. It spins freely, but as soon as you'd get some heat in the engine, this would expand and it would cause damage. So that means we gotta take the head off. I do have spare good rod to put in, so we're gonna be putting 4 non-discolored rods in and fixing this issue. So it's gonna have a new head gasket, new head bolts, used known good crankshaft, and use known good connecting rods to fix this and get it back on the road. So it's going to be a bottom end rebuild besides the rings and whatnot, but it's only 114,000 miles. They should all be fine. All right, so I've done the plastic gauge. They're all in spec and they are even. Okay, so here's an update. I have the new rod bolts in there and I have everything lubricated. So I did HVL oil and assembly lube paste on the bearings, and I have the mains fully torqued down as they need to be, which is 20 Newton meters initial torquing pressure, and then you're gonna go 90-90. So you start here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and once you get that done, you give her a spin and see how she feels. So this spins like butter, even with the pistons inside there, but the spark plugs are out. So basically, in my opinion, if you can easily turn it with your pinky, you got a decent amount of pressure with the pistons in there. We're at the point now where we have good side to side. So I had to play around with the bearing combinations. Even though this engine called for blue uppers and mostly a combination of red lowers or yellow lowers, we had enough bearings in hand to be able to fine tune the clearance to get every journal to be pretty much identical. And it just so happens that this block and bearing combination with this crankshaft is on the tighter side, kind of right in the middle of where you'd want to be if you're running 5W30 on a regular street driven car. The rod bearings are looser, like in the 0.35 range, but also that's tighter for rod bearing clearances, so really good for just efficiency and whatnot. It turned out that we got to a place where this engine overall is dialed in for 5W30. Feels great though. None of these rods belonged to this engine before. Okay, right now we're ready to build oil pressure by allowing it to crank multiple times. So we're going to see how the engine sounds being spun by the starter. So let's go ahead. Let's hear first start. So that went well, it's idling well and running well. I'm going to drain the oil now, just double check the condition and go ahead and refill it, and we'll take it for test drive. So this is one of the heavier cars that comes with this engine from the factory. It's probably one of the worst case scenarios in terms of how much strain is on the motor. It seems as though you won't get to 70,000 miles without needing the wastegate rebuild on the turbo or a whole new turbo. And it seems like timing chain guides are going to fail well before 100,000 miles, you know, more like 70,000 miles. I remember seeing a lot of these on the road when they first came out, and then now if you see an X3 of this generation, a lot of times it's the diesel model or it's the N25. I just think a lot of these were mechanically totaled, and you know, when you add up the cost of a turbo, maybe you need a new engine because it spun a rod bearing. You know, if you're going to get oil starvation because of pieces of your timing chain guide getting inside the oil pickup, you're much more likely to have engine issues on this one because it just needs a lot more flow and the engine's under a lot more strain carrying the weight. It has no problem moving this SUV around. This particular one has 114,000 miles on it, and it's been very well maintained. It's very clean inside and out, but still, engine went. But I saved it. We're at the point now that I've put all the updated timing gear on it and rebuilt the engine, that it's got another 100,000 in it. So the service life of this car will still be reasonable after this was saved. It sat for 2.5 years, I believe, or close to 3 years. A couple people worked on it, gave up on it, didn't realize how bad the damage was, and here we are where I've saved it. So it's actually a nice spec. I'll go over the specifications. I'll cut over to that. So this is a 13 X3 X-Drive 28i. It's got a black on oyster interior. It has a panoramic sunroof. It's got heated seats. It has surround view cameras. Power liftgate. I'm pretty sure these wheels are a bit of an upgrade. Also, the package includes better grills. The mileage is 114. In terms of interior condition, it's actually in really good shape. This has navigation as well. The only flaw in the interior is the glove box door, which is a common problem. It needs to be glued back down. It has leather wrapped door handles, decent looking walnut trim. Steering wheel doesn't really show much wear for the mileage. Really clean car. This is of course a clean title. So it was purchased by a mechanic and they spent around $900 doing the whole timing chain kit, which is needed on these cars. They bought it as a flip car themselves, but it didn't work out for them. They were having trouble with this one issue. The suspension's tight. Front and rear, the suspension's very tight. The tires are good quality. It's got Pirelli tires. It was a well-serviced vehicle and it's a good, honest 100,000 mile SUV. And I know this could sound like a bit of a sales pitch, but I am going to be selling this at the end of the process. If you guys have been following along, I do flip these cars and we're going to make this thing mint, perfect, in as good condition as possible and do all the preventive maintenance. And then so now we're going to do the usual gamut of mechanical repairs. We're going to do the buffing, polishing, ceramic coating, making the thing look new, going over anything mechanical. It really doesn't need a whole lot. It's probably going to need rotors in the front. It's going to need a new transmission pan and fluid just for maintenance. Just whatever it takes to make this thing as reliable as possible for many years to come. The usual formula that you've been seeing on my channel lately. If one of you guys wants this as your daily, I'm going to make sure it's solid for you. You can shoot me an email. I'll put my info in the description and you can put a deposit on it, hold it. Just heads up, we have a white F30 that's already happened on. So we're getting to the point where these cars are selling before I even think of listing them. But this one's on the road again and it's almost ready to go. It's going to be ready for sale pretty soon. So for a modern BMW, this is probably your worst case scenario, but at the same time, this one is like it's got 0 miles in terms of all those problematic things, because new turbo, new upgraded timing equipment, new main and rod bearings, new crankshaft, new rods, everything is reconditioned, new head gasket, head bolts, main bolts, rod bolts. They did everything. It's all in the time lapse. So this is now a solid car, and they drive great. They got good fuel economy and they handle pretty good. It's fun to drive. It's got all the torque and everything that you'd want for an SUV. This one's very tight. It was well maintained. All the interior materials are in good shape. I just got to fix the glove box door. That's a common problem where the glove box will peel. But beyond that, this thing's solid. I'm going to put some miles on it and then we're going to sell it. Even the worst modern BMW, if it gets in the right hands of someone that can take care of all the things that could just let you down, then it's going to be super reliable. It's going to be like a new car again, because they all have just certain flaws. When you tackle them, you're good to go after that. And some of the more modern cars, like my 2018 440i, is dead reliable. I made a video on that recently. I'll put a link in the description for the parts I used to save this car, including the rod bearings, main bearings, timing equipment, the whole setup that I use, in case you guys are interested in potentially doing the same on one of your cars. That'll conclude the video. If this is the first video you're catching on mine, please consider subscribing. If you liked it, please give it a like so it rank higher. Thanks for watching.